Perfect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Like I said, this is being recorded, and the team at Optimus will go and get you a recording of this overview. So if you do come in a little late, you can go in and review any portion of that. Again, my name is John Phipps. I'm one of the senior channel managers here. Work closely with the team at Optimus. We've built a very successful partnership over the last year. And really, this comes down to us spending a lot of time with them. Optimus is really, as far as I can tell, one of the best partners out there. I always am excited to work for partners that are focused on providing their clients and their customers the best possible information. Optimus absolutely does this. And part of what they do is they provide additional training for all of their clients. And so that's kind of what we're going to be focused on today. Again, John Phipps, I'm one of the senior channel managers here. I manage that relationship. And I kind of came up with the idea for today's report. I wanted to do building complex operational reports with a BI tool. I'm sure if anybody's seen some of the Jet overviews before, we've got a few general examples, but I wanted to expand that out a little bit more. And I want to talk a little bit about how an analytics tool is going to make it very easy to build fairly complex reports. I think for the purposes of today's conversation, we're mostly going to be talking about Great Plains, but what we're going to cover today is going to be relevant really to any database, not only any Dynamics database, but any database as a whole. So hopefully everybody will be able to walk out of today's training with a lot of additional knowledge that they could use moving forward. And so kind of working through here. So just a little bit of background on Jet. I'm sure many of you have seen this before, but I just want to give a little bit of background about us. We've been in the space for 17 plus years, founded in 2002. And really what we focus on is getting information out of your database, really specifically Microsoft Dynamics databases, into a place that end users can actively work with. For most end users, that's going to be Microsoft Excel. So that's what we're going to have and what we're going to focus on very heavily today. When our company was actually founded back in 2002, our founder actually came up with the company because he was talking with the CFO and they were working as a Microsoft Dynamics partner for Dynamics Nav. The CFO was one of their clients, and he wanted to have a way to get information out of his database into Excel. As he said, you'll pry Excel from my cold, dead hands. So our founder actually went and came up with what ultimately became our flagship product, Jet Reports and Jet Analytics, in order to go in and do that. And really, we've built out our business via word of mouth. So you've got over 14,000 plus companies that are using Jet on a daily basis to drive better decisions and drive better business outcomes. Really, this came almost entirely from word of mouth. We've provided great solutions that have really helped people work with their data more effectively. And because of that, we really not until the last year or two have we actually had a large marketing presence. Most of these customers that have joined us is because of the functionality you'll see here today. It's going to be very easy to get information out of your database into Excel, or if you're using data visualization tools, Power BI. And so again, that's really a testament towards the robustness and strength of Jet solutions. And then, as many of you are aware, we actually were acquired by a company called Insight Software based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, back in May. The reasoning being that Insight as a whole is really working to and actively becoming one of the leaders in the reporting space for all ERPs, not just Dynamics, but really every single ERP that's out there. And when they were kind of going through and evaluating different solutions, they really saw that they were lacking in the Microsoft Dynamics space and really had a specific idea about kind of what they wanted to bring to market. The timing happened to be right that they were able to acquire Jet. And we've been very fortunate. That's meant a lot of additional resources behind us. So we've really been able to expand kind of all of our teams and go in and build out all of our functionality. So really, like I said, a great partnership that's probably really going to help us grow even further, provide more solutions that are going to make it easier for end users to really kind of get at the core of our same mission, which is getting information out of their database, regardless of what it is, and then putting it into a place that they can actually work with it. And you see that 14,000 plus customer count. What I think it's important to focus on today is really the flexibility of the tool. You'll see, out of those customers, you'll see a wide range of different organizations. You're going to see a wide range of different companies in different industries. And as you can imagine, each of these organizations is going to have a database that's set up a little bit differently. If I'm using Great Plains for manufacturing, it's going to look different than if I'm using Great Plains for distribution. I'm going to have customizations. I'm going to have third-party add-ons. Maybe have made some extra changes to my system so that I can more effectively run my business. But with Jet, we can read those customizations. We can read those third-party add-ons. We can read those custom views, which means that everything that you'll see here today will just work, which is why we have so many different clients here. Another thing to note here is that many of these clients aren't just using Jet to do reporting and analytics out of their Dynamics database. Many of these have other technologies that they're working through. They've got other systems that they want to report against. And in the same way, all these companies are going to have different technology stacks, but with Jet, they're going to be able to pull that information out and ultimately use that to drive better decisions and drive better business outcomes. So again, we'll kind of see how that'll work. Again, the flexibility is really a testament towards what we're going to be talking about today, which is an analytics tool that's really going to make it easier. And it's an approach that's going to make building out complex reports, specifically complex reports against multiple data sources, very easy and effective. And just to run through, just a quick reminder on our tools. We're going to run through, again, a real-time example here with Jet Reports. So Jet Reports, again, a real-time reporting tool. What that means for our purposes here is that when you hit run, you get the latest information off of your database. And so if there's additional posted transactions, it'll make it so that those transactions will immediately be apparent. And you'll go in and you'll see this. The nice part about Jet is that all that functionality and kind of look and feel are very easy to set up initially. And then you can hit run and you can get all of that information. But there is a challenge with real-time reporting tools, and we're going to talk about that today. And that's that the end user really has to know the database that they're looking at. And that's going to be a challenge across any real-time tool, even a best-in-class tool like Jet Reports. There'll be a challenge around kind of pulling that information out and interacting with it. But again, it's still going to be critical that you have the ability to run reports real time, even if most of what we're going to be talking about is our analytics solution that's going to make building reports much easier. And then we'll probably talk a little bit about the Jet Hub. The Jet Hub is the tool for report distribution here. So if you want to get reports out to your users, the Jet Hub is going to be the way that you can go in and do that. That'll sit on your server, so you get to decide where you want to have this set up. And then it's going to be set up so that you can manage reports. You'll have report management. You'll have run history, so you can see kind of all the past times reports have been run. You can schedule reports to be run and emailed out. And kind of all of that functionality will just work very effectively to push and distribute reports out. And again, the nice part about the analytics approach that we're talking about is that end users will not only be able to consume any report they want, but in many cases easily build out the report. So that'll help through this process. So what we're going to talk about today, this is really kind of the key value behind why you want to use an analytics solution for reporting and dashboards. If we start over here on the left, this is going to be our relational databases. This is Dynamics GP. Everything is in a table and field structure, and everything kind of sits independently. If you think about what these databases have existed for historically, they were really designed to store information. They weren't necessarily designed with the ideas of getting information out or building complex reports. considered in their process. It was much more, I need to have this information stored somewhere. And then as I pull it out, I'll go through that process. And you'll see here, that means that all that information is going to be in a fairly complex format. So if I'm going through as the end user, and we'll show an example of this, I really need to know my data source. I need to know where everything sits. I need to know how all my tables and fields relate. So if I want to go in and tie that together, again, I have to kind of know how all of that is mapped together. But with the data warehouse in cubes, which is Jet's business intelligence approach, all that information is already tied together. So if I want to build out a complex report with the data warehouse, I can go in and I've already tied 7, 8, 9 different tables together into a single location. So when I go in and I want to build out a complex report, I can just grab all of those fields instantly. Another thing to note here is that we kind of talked about this first example just being Great Plains, but this could be your entire technology stack. So if you have other databases that you want to connect to, it's going to sit in the same format. So I'm going to be tied together fairly loose. Again, the end user really has to know the data in order to tie it together. And this becomes much more difficult and error prone if you have multiple data sources without an analytics tool. The reason being is that each connection between that information is going to have to take place within each report. So it's a report by report basis as you're going through the process, which means you're opening yourself up to making potential mistakes. And as I'm sure everybody is aware of, making mistakes in reporting can drastically change how you're running your organization. Because all of a sudden you might be making business decisions based off incorrect assumptions. The nice part about the analytics tool is you can tie together all that information once and then report against it in one format. You don't have to worry about the likelihood that you're making those mistakes. So going back to that data warehouse piece, again, that kind of covers that multiple sources. This can have multiple databases. And the nice part about Jet is that we can connect to anything that's SQL, OLE, ODBC, and easily tie all that information together and then allow you to report against it. It'll be much cleaner. It's all going to be organized by subject depending on what you're looking at. And then this is typically where most BI vendors are going to stop, is in this middle portion here. Because Jet specializes in the dynamics space, we're able to take it a step further. So we provide what are called OLAP cubes or BI cubes that'll make reporting even easier. And most of the examples that I'm going to go through here today are all built using cubes. The biggest thing that you're going to see is you're going to see that this is all just going to have easy dimensionality. Now, what do I mean by dimensionality? Dimensionality means that if I want to do any breakdown of any of the information inside of my database, I can just go in and do it instantly. So I'll click through a lot of my different examples, and I don't necessarily even know where the data is going to sit in some of these examples. To be honest, in a lot of these examples, I haven't done too much preparation for, because I know with the cubes, it's going to be very easy to go in and do that. So what we'll go through today is that I'm able to actually build out complex reports without really doing a lot of prep work, just because the cubes are going to be so powerful that when I'm going in and doing reporting, all I need to know is, what do I want to pull out of the system? And I can go in and tie all that information together instantly without an awareness of how my data source is set up. If you ask me to build out most of these examples that I'm going to show here using our real-time tool, I could not do it. Or maybe I could do it, but it would take hours and hours of me prepping for this. But with the analytics tool, again, I can go in, I can build out some of these examples with kind of a minimal background, just because the tool is going to make it so easy to go in and do that. You'll be able to see I can just go in and build out most of those examples without too much work. The other nice part about the cubes is they're going to factor in pre-calculated values. And what that means is that I can actually have calculations set up on the back end, and then I'm reporting against specific measures that are pre-calculated. So stuff like gross profit, you'll see a couple examples in what we'll talk about today. We can set specific calculations within the cubes and then use those to report against. What that means is those calculations live inside of the data warehouse in cubes. So everybody's dealing with the same source of truth. There's no confusion about how stuff like how stuff like gross profit got calculated. There's one calculation. Everybody's going to be looking at the same numbers. And this will also be very useful if you want to go into more complex dashboarding. I wasn't going to spend too much time on that. But again, if you've been in any of my other presentations, that's what we talk a lot about, is building out complex dashboards. Dashboards are always effective if you have stuff like KPIs. And again, you can have KPIs set in the cubes, and you can go through and do that process. And then the last thing, this is going to be much faster. So instead of having to wait for additional reports to be run, I'll have that information instantly. If I want to make ad hoc modifications here, I can do that very quickly and easily with the tool to those specific reports because everything's already been pre-calculated. So it's just going to be much quicker. And then the last piece here is that I can also kind of control how I push these out. So some of these examples will be a little bit more general, but like I mentioned earlier, with an analytics tool, it's very easy to push reporting out to all of your users. And with the cubes, you can control who gets access to what. So you can actually get very granular that you can say, hey, I only want maybe my specific floor staff to have access to one specific portion of the cube. You don't have to push all that information out to everybody. So end users can actually build a lot of these reports on their own. They don't need the IT team to come in and do a lot of the modifications to build out some of these specific reports. So again, the benefits of the cubes, it's going to be much easier to build out reports. You'll see in the examples here, everything I build out, I just need to kind of generally know what I'm looking for, and I can go in and build it out. I don't need to know the structure of the data. It'll be a lot more controlled. I can push this out, making sure that I know that the right people will see the right information when they need to see it. And you're going to have much better performance. This is all pre-calculated on a regular basis, and you're going to decide how regular that is. And so that means that you'll have much better performance with an analytics tool. So working through our process here, I always like to kind of run through this slide because this talks about the deployment process for an analytics tool, obviously kind of specifically a deployment process for Jet Analytics. And we start over here on the left, and we've got all of our databases. Again, we're starting with our Dynamics database. We'll kind of run through some GP examples today because that's what we're going to be focused on with the training. But some of the examples that we're running through with the data warehouse and cubes actually have data from other data sources. We've got information from a legacy, another Dynamics database. So there's both GP and NAV information in the data warehouse and cubes examples that we're going to go into. It's also possible to pull information from other systems. So you can go in and you can look at information from your CRM or any other data source that you have, you can pull into Jet. And like I mentioned earlier, Jet's very flexible. Again, that kind of goes back to why we have so many different customers that are spread out in all those different industries. But we can connect to anything that's SQL, OLE, ODBC. We can even connect to Excel sheets if you want to use those as data sources. So Jet, just as a whole, can easily connect to any data source. We've got a AnySource or universal connector, and we partner with a company called CData that has hundreds of different connections that you can connect to. So pretty much if you name it, we can probably connect to it, or we can find a way to get that information out of the data source into your hands. Now, going through that process, typically building out a data warehouse in cubes is a very manual, labor-intensive process. So to end up with the final cubes that we have, again, it's typically fairly difficult. Historically, how that's all been done is you've paid a developer to manually sit there and write out all the SQL code to tie everything together, because these data sources are going to sit in SQL, and we'll just go in and get views to all of these, and then we'll tie together how everything relates. Again, typically a fairly difficult manual process to take information from here to here. Now, one of the things that Jet does to set itself apart is we have what's called the Jet Data Manager. And what that is this is what's called an ETL tool. So extract, transform, and load. And what this does is it takes information out of these databases, which are all going to be in this format, and brings them through the process to the data warehouse and cubes in a very easy way. All the changes are built out in a point and click interface. So the end user is easily able to say, hey, I want to pull in these tables and fields. I want to relate them to these tables and fields, and I want to deploy those out to the data warehouse. Now, this is still kind of fairly technical. You're not going to have all your users doing it. But what this does mean is the end user can build out the data warehouse and cubes 5 to 7 times faster than how this is typically done, which, like I said, that's typically paying somebody to write out SQL code. But when you're going through and using an ETL tool, you can deploy those changes much faster and much more effectively. And not only initially, but also you can deploy changes as you're going through your process. This is something that really is going to be critical for any analytics solution that I always recommend folks to think about, is if you're going through that process, making sure that you have a way to not only deploy those changes, but make modifications during that process. So if I want to come in and maybe a year later, I've built out my data warehouse in cubes, but I need to change how we're doing stuff because every business is going to change how they might be running stuff. I can go in and easily modify the data warehouse in cubes. And again, I can go in and do that very quickly and effectively. So again, you'll see in this example, we're going to walk through the process. ETL tool, which is what the Jet Data Manager stands for, is extract, transform, and load. And you can see all of those processes happening here. Extract, we're pulling from our data sources. Transform, we're pulling it through a staging database. And what the staging database does is it only pulls in what's going to be relevant, and then it pushes all that information into the data warehouse so that we can more effectively report against it. And then once that's all set up, we can push the data warehouse information into specific cubes to make it as easy as possible to go in and do any of your reporting. And once that information, again, is inside of the cubes, you can go in and you can push that into the Jet Excel add-in. So you can go in and build out some of those examples. You can go in and build out a Power BI dashboard. So we'll go through a few of those examples today. And then you can even push those reports out into Excel Online using the Jet Hub. So a lot of flexibility there. And so again, that kind of takes us to Jet Analytics, which is what we're going to mostly be focused on today. I already kind of mentioned the data warehouse automation piece is going to be very important to us. It's going to make it so you can easily go in and make customizations to the data warehouse in cubes and push everything out. And then you can keep all your information organized. It's also going to be set up so that you can deploy that information anywhere that you want. So again, most of the examples we'll talk about today will be inside of Excel. If you're curious about dashboarding, again, I'd reach out to the team at Optimus. I've got another training that we did last month around data visualization. So if you'd like to learn more about that, that's always a good possibility. But we'll go through a few Power BI examples. But this is going to make it very effective to push that information out anywhere that you want. And you can be confident that everybody's looking at the right version of the truth because, again, the process that's in here, everything's going to be accurate. It'll be governed. So you can guarantee that the right people are seeing the right information at the right time. That brings us into Jet deployment. This always comes up. So I'm going to actually try to answer some of these questions initially. Jet deploys very quickly. Now, typically, a business intelligence tool, according to Gartner, is a 12 to 19 month deployment process. With Jet, we significantly cut down that time frame so that you're immediately able to get started building out some of these complex reports that I'm going to show here in a second. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first one we've kind of probably beaten to the ground a little bit here. The data warehouse automation tool makes it very easy to make customizations. But the other thing that we do here is that we have a pre-built project. We've got a pre-built project for Great Plains, and that's probably what we'll be kind of walking you through today. And the nice part is since that is already pre-configured, that'll install very, very quickly. And we take all of our experience when we build out these pre-built projects. We've got thousands of clients that are using them. We kind of look at, when we're putting these together, what are the most common tables and fields users need to get information from? We'll go ahead and we'll deploy that out. Then we push it out to the end user. And most end users are able to start with 80, 90% of what they need out of the box instantly. And then any additional customizations can be done using the data warehouse automation tool. And again, this is all probably going to be done by the Optimus team. They're building out a good team to go in and make those changes. So you can start, kind of with 80% of what you need with the pre-built project. And the pre-built project installs very quickly. Typically it installs in 2.5 to 3 hours. So it's something that, folks get off the call today, they wanted to get started. We probably don't have availability, but if we did have availability, if you wanted to actually start out building some of the examples that I have here by the end of the day, if you reached out to us when you got done with this presentation and we were able to get the install set up, you could do that. And we've actually had clients do that in the past. But again, the pre-built project will get you about 80% of what you need, maybe 90 depending on kind of the structure of what you want. But then with the data warehouse automation tool, you can build out the data warehouse in cubes to your exact specifications. So you can make it very easy to build out these complex reports or these dashboards based off your criteria very quickly and effectively. And then you can push this out to as many users as you want, depending on kind of what you want to look at. So I think I've taken up quite a bit of time here with the overview. Let's go into a couple examples here and we'll go from there. So just give me a second. Let me open up, I'm going to open up a new Excel tab here. So we actually want to start from scratch. Perfect. So first thing here, just to kind of introduce Jet, I'm sure we've probably got plenty of folks that have seen it in the past, but I just want to kind of go in and do a quick recap here. So we'll wait for that. Jet is just going to start out as an Excel add-in. So it'll plug directly into Excel. And you can see I've got all the functionality that I need to interact with my data. So if I want to go in and I want to design out reports, we can do that. If I want to run reports, I can do that here. So again, if I've got a pre-built report, I can go in and I can hit run and I can get the latest numbers on it fairly quickly. I've got the ability to actually drill into specific reports depending on what I'm looking at. And we'll talk about a couple different ways drill down can be done. I've got a couple different ways to build out reports. What we'll probably go through today is going to be the browser tool on this real-time example, and then we'll spend some time with either the browser tool and the pivot tables as we get into the analytics and cubes, building out those more complex reports. You can go and I can see that. I've got report distribution here, so I can upload reports out to the Jet Hub that we talked about. And then we can schedule reports to be run and emailed out. We can even do some Word export stuff. So we can actually tie some of the reports that we're working on with Word if we maybe need to go through and on accounts receivable or the accounts payable, maybe we need to send out some notification to that. We can use the Word export option to do that. And then again, got the ability to toggle between different data sources, which is what we'll talk about today. I'm going to start out with a real-time example against GP. So we're going to kind of show you what Jet Analytics is going to help you avoid. But then we'll also probably spend most of our times reporting against the Jet cubes. And you'll see you can just toggle those different data sources. And then again, I can toggle between different companies depending on what I'm looking for. But I want to start just to kind of lay the groundwork here on how difficult is it to build out a real-time report without the cubes. So on this example, we'll use the Jet browser. This is actually one of the more effective ways to get into your data source. And to be clear here, we're looking directly at Great Plains in this example. We're not looking at the cubes. So when I open it up, I see all of my tables and fields. And you can see, even with Jet, we've tried to make it as easy as possible. We've added some friendly names, but this is still going to be fairly difficult for me to build out complex reports. If I want to go in and do that, I have to know, again, where all my tables and fields sit, depending on what I'm looking for. I have to go through here, and I'm going to build out a quick sales example. And we're going to have to find that table that we need. So we'll keep going in and working our way through. We might have to just search it. There we go. And with this, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to use one of the custom views that we have with Jet, but you can see it's still going to be fairly challenging for me to build out reports. I need to know where everything sits. So if I want to build out a customer sales report and I just want to see, how much are our customers selling, I can do that here. So we can go customer number, we can go customer name. I want to break this down by state. And let's do maybe salesperson ID and sales amount. And then we can drag and drop this in. And then I've got everything broken down. Now for a real-time tool, this is going to be very easy. It's all just drag and drop. I can grab everything that I want. I can hit run. I can get all of that data depending on what I'm looking for. But you'll see it's still going to take a fair amount of manual manipulation to actually get the report formatted the way I want. Say I want to run a calculation. So I want something that'd be similar to those pre-calculated values that will show in analytics. In this, I'm just going to have to do that inside of Excel. So if we want to do an 8% calculation, we'll say 8%. Maybe that's a commission that we're doing for this. We can go in and tie that together. And we can go in and do some formatting here. Just drop in some color. Let's bold that out. Now, this is one of the strengths of Jet. It's kind of universal across both the analytics tool and the real-time reporting tools, that you can do all your formatting inside of Excel. Now let's go in. Let's change this one to currency. And we can do that. Let's build out complex. Let's build out some totals here. Let's maybe bold this out. Let's add a top border. And we've grabbed all this information. Maybe we actually want to grab a chart here, and let's maybe stick it over here. Great. And then maybe last thing from a formatting standpoint, maybe I want to hit view. And then maybe when I rerun this report, I want to go in and have this column stretch. I can go in and do that easily. So now I've built out and formatted this report, but I still have to go through and filter this out. Go into Jet, go into NL. And then I have to manually put my filters in. And same thing, I can only filter by the fields that I'm attached to. So we're using this customer table here. So we're going to say, all right, table, we want to filter by state. And, maybe initially we want to go in and let's just grab maybe like Minnesota. And let's grab Michigan. Let's just do Michigan, Minnesota, and we'll just manually type that in. There we go. We'll hit OK. We can automatically update. And then, maybe we want to add one more filter. We actually want to filter this out by actual amounts. So let's do sales amount. Let's just say we want to do everything greater than 3,000. Greater than 3. And we'll hit OK. And now I go in and get this. I hit run. And I get kind of all this information. So again, it took me quite a bit of time to build out this example. And you'll see this example's somewhat limited. If I want to actually get the salesperson first and last name, that'll be fairly difficult. If I want to know kind of what item categories I'm selling, I have to go back into the browser, find those appropriate tables and fields, and build this out. And I'll be quite frank, I don't know Great Plains enough that I actually could build out that example in what we're looking at. But this kind of shows the value of the analytics tool. Go here. We're going to go in. And now I want to build out not only the same example, but maybe something a little bit more complex. In the Jet Cubes, I can do that right here. So now I'm changing my data source. And then we're going to use the pivot table functionality inside of Jet in order to build out these examples. There's a couple different ways you can report against the cubes. I like the pivot table functionality. I think it helps people understand how everything's tied together. Most end users prefer it because it's fairly easy. But if I wanted to build out a bit more of like a grid view report very similar to this, I could use the browser tool. The big strength though is going to be that I'm now able to report using these cubes. And there's a lot of benefits behind that. You know, if I go into one of these pre-built cubes, we'll go into sales because we want to build a similar sales example to what we just built. I can open that up and now I can see how I'm reporting. So instead of that kind of large list that we got when we went through that first example that had all of those tables and fields and they were fairly complex to use, with Jet Analytics and the cubes, I just need to know what I want to pull out of the system. Like I said, this will be very quick and very effective. I can go in. I can see all those details. In cubes, you'll see in the examples that we'll run through today, they're made up of just, kind of two elements. They're made up of measures, which are all numerical values. And those can be actual numbers inside of your database, or those could be pre-calculated values. And then we've also got dimensions. So anything that's going to give that meaning. So if I want to look at sales, but I want to look at item category, broken down by state, broken down by salespeople, I can do that instantly. Now let's say I want to actually build out a bit more of like a complex version of the report that we're looking at. Maybe I want to look at sales amount for maybe all the customers that we're looking at. And we could probably even go in and do that. We could say, hey, I want to look at sales by our sell to customers. And there we go. We can grab that instantly. But now maybe if we want to build that out a little bit more, maybe we want to not only just look at sales amount, but I want to know, okay, well, what is it actually costing me in each of these examples? So let's go through sales, and then we'll go through cost and then profit and profit percentage. We can grab those details instantly. And then maybe I want to break this down a little bit more. Maybe I want to look at this by item category. We can do that. So not only can I see what all my customers are selling, I can see broken down by different item categories depending on how we're looking at it. We can also look at stuff like posting date. So if I want to go in and say, hey, when are we selling these? What are we doing that? And you'll see this starts to get a little bit more complex. So maybe we want to move stuff around. Instead of having kind of all of my customers listed here, I'd rather be able to filter out by them. So I can drag that up here. And this becomes a much more manageable report. I can search through all my customers. I can look at kind of what we're looking at depending on what we want to see. And now I can also go in and break this down a little bit more. So we're pulling in salesperson in that previous example. Let's pull it in here. And then let's say we want to break this down a little bit further. Maybe we want to look at maybe our sell to customer by state. Go ahead and pull that in. And then maybe we even want to look at kind of where our locations are all based. And you can see I built a much more complex report very quickly with Jet Analytics because I didn't need to understand the structure of the data. I just needed to know what I wanted to pull out. And now I can go in and I can filter those out by those different salespeople. I can look at those different states. If I just want to see, okay, what am I selling in California? I can do that. And I don't need to know my data source. I just need to know what I want to pull in. And I could even look at like my different sales, my different customers, depending on kind of where they're located. So again, builds a much more effective and powerful report in conjunction to the real-time example versus the analytics example. Now, these are all sales. I wanted to run through a couple other examples in terms of how these are going to be set up. And what we're going to use for these next examples is I'm actually going to take some of the pre-built reports that we have and then show you how easy it is to actually put those together. But before we do that, I'm going to jump over and actually show where you can find some of those pre-built reports. Many of the examples that I'll actually build out today, you can actually go in and download right now. So if we go through this training, and if there's an example you were hoping to see that you weren't able to see, you can get a sense of everything that can be built with Jet out of the box at our website. So again, jetglobal.com, it'll take you to the Jet portion of Insight Software. We can scroll on down here, and you can see some of the sample reports that we have. Like I said, I'm going to be recreating a couple of these in the examples that we have, so you can go in and see those details, but you can actually go in and download all of these. There's 206 plus pre-built reports that you can go in and use. And there's going to be some reports. There's also going to be some dashboards that, again, we'll talk about a little bit. We'll talk about using Power BI, but there's lots of different pieces of functionality that you can go in and do. And again, the nice part about Jet is that you can go in and make modifications. So like all the examples that I'll be running through today, we'll be actually kind of recreating some of these reports and showing how easy it is to build out some of these examples. So that being said, we're going to switch over. We've done the sales example that we're running through. Now we're going to run into actually building out this inventory report. And what this one is just an inventory value over time. You can see fairly complex. We've got lots of details here. We've got costs, but we've also got the ability to switch by different location, different companies, different years, and different product groups. So again, I'm going to actually build that out again from scratch. So we'll go through that process here. And let's go in and just open up another new sheet. And what we'll do here is just build out something really similar to what we already had put together. So again, we're going to go into our Jet ribbon. And actually, let's put this over here. We can kind of do something that'll look a little similar to what we already had. We're going to go into our pivot tables. But this time, again, we're going to go into inventory because we want to build a complex inventory. With this, like I said, I can just go in and grab value. And then on this guy, we're going to play around with how we go in and do the timing on this one. So again, I could go in and I want to have this broken down by year. And I also want to drop quarter in here. Oh, or let's actually drop year by quarter, but we want to have that broken down by rows. Now we've got kind of a similar breakdown. And I like this actually a little bit better than how this is set up. Go in and see those details. And now if I want to go in and again, just create a graph, I can do that right here inside of Excel. This one will be a little bit interesting because again, this one will be the values a little bit different. So some of this will have negative value, but again, this is demo data. You can see I can have that complex inventory report. And now we can go in, and if I want to break this out by location, I can go in and do that here. And I can move this down a little bit. I can move everything around depending on kind of what I want to see. Then maybe I want to break this down also by my different companies. Exact same thing. And I haven't actually run through this example before, but because Jet Analytics makes it so easy to do that, I can go in and see these details pretty easily. And then let's see, what else do we want to break this down by? Maybe we actually want to have a specific year filter. I can add that in here. We could tie all these examples together. And then maybe we want to also grab this by product group. And let's go grab product posting group. And actually, you know what? I don't like product posting group. Let's actually do this by this product group. There we go. That has a bit more information. So again, I built out this fairly complex report without a lot of preparation. without knowing my data source, I just needed to know what I wanted to pull out. And this guy, I can slice and dice it really quickly and easily. I can look at these by different years. I can look at these by different product categories. I can look at this by different locations, really depending on kind of what I'm looking at. So there's inventory. Let's go through another example. Like I said, I promised a few examples on this. I wanted to get out of what we typically do here at Jet, which is we always end up showing sales examples. Let's go through and we'll do another one. Let's do accounts payable. And this is always something that when I talk to Great Plains customers is a bit of a challenge. So what we're actually going to do is build out a couple of these aging examples. So again, we've got this one set up. So you're looking at aging in local currency. I'm also going to look at kind of aging by currency group. Time committing, we might even be able to build out kind of both of these examples depending on what we're looking at here. So let's go through. And same thing, I'm going to actually clear out a couple of these just so we're not taking up too much space with some of these examples. But let's build up another new example. Again, we're opening up another new Jet workbook. And I'm sure those of you that were been paying attention can probably tell where we're going to go next to build out accounts payable. We're going to go into the pivot table functionality. But this time, we're just going to grab our payables cube. Hit OK. And now I can go in and start tying together all my information depending on what I want to look at. So first of all, maybe in this example, we want to see this in local currency. Oh, and if this lets me click into Excel, come on, Excel. I might have too many Excel tabs open, so it might not be letting me grab the right one. There we go. So let's go in and grab local currency. And let's just see what we want to get here. And I think on this one, let's just grab amount. And then I can grab my aging bucket. And then this is nice because I can actually drop out my aging bucket depending on kind of how I have everything set up. And then maybe on this one, I actually want to look at it by the vendors that we're selling to or the sell to customers. So let's go in and let's actually grab pay to vendors. We can see who actually kind of owes us money, when they owed us, when they're actually paying it to us. We can even filter this out by vendor group, depending on kind of what we want to look at. Again, I could see kind of all of this structure. This one, I want to actually switch it around a little bit. I want to put this on top here. That looks a little nicer. So now I can see this vendor by posting date easily tied together. I have all those details. And then I can go in depending on kind of what I'm looking at. And I can look at only open accounts. And then I can also filter this out by, again, other criteria. So if I want to actually look at, let's take a look here, currency, I can add that in as a slicer. And I can do the same thing. Maybe we want to look at this by our different companies. I can look at that. So again, I can look at all my AP accounts broken down by my different customers with different customer groups, with currency, with the ability to filter out stuff depending on if I'm looking at different companies or which organizations I'm looking at. And we could do the exact same thing, but maybe I want to see a similar aging report, but I want to see it broken down by currency. I can do the exact same thing. We'll go back into our pivot table. We'll go into payables. We'll grab some of those examples. Same thing, let's grab local currency. And then let's go in and grab aging bucket. But this time, I want to actually see it broken down by not company, currency. I can go in and see any of those details, and same thing. Kind of see where everything is at. I can build something really similar to what I just had built. And again, I can kind of see all of those details depending on what I want to look at. So again, very easy for me to build out complex reports very quickly and effectively. So we're looking at accounts payable. Maybe we want to do another example. Maybe I want to actually look at purchases. Exact same thing. I can go through and use the Jet Analytics tool and add this in. And I realized I wasn't planning on using purchases, but I think the accounts payable example, thinking about a couple purchases options, I want to show that same functionality. So exact same thing. We're going into one of the pre-built cubes. And now I just need to see, okay, maybe, what are we purchasing? I can go in and see those details. What's it costing us? How much are we purchasing? What's the average unit cost? Let's see all of that. And same thing, I can see this broken down by item category. And I can even filter out by item depending on what I want to look at. If I want to see when we're purchasing stuff, again, I can see all of those details right here. If I want to see who's purchasing this, I can go in and I can look at all my different purchasers. I can kind of select any of my vendors depending on kind of what I'm looking at. So if I want to go in, maybe I want to actually filter this out by all my vendors. I can go in and see all of these details very quickly and very effectively, depending on what I'm looking at. And then same thing, we've also got some, last but not least, we've got some finance examples. I'm probably not going to spend too much time on these because honestly, most of our clients typically still continue to use Jet Reports, so the real-time tool for most of their finances. But for any sort of more complex financial report, again, you can use analytics, and you can see this is that same format that we have set up here. And we've got all of these examples. And again, you can kind of see how we've built all this out. We just grabbed everything that we wanted. This one's got quite a lot of filters, but this means that I can toggle this specific income statement a couple different ways, depending on what I want to look at. If I want to look at this broken out by different companies, I can do that here. And the nice part is because I'm using analytics, this is where I get all that speed that we've talked about. Everything's pre-calculated. I don't need to wait for any of this to run. It's all kind of quickly and effectively pulled together. So I can go in and sort of pull this out any way that I want. So again, these are kind of all of the report creation examples that I had prepared. So we'll kind of run through those. The other thing I want to talk about here is, if you want to take these not only from just reports, but with Jet Analytics, you can take this into Jet dashboards. We've got some possibilities there. I've actually got, I didn't pull it up, but let's pull it up right now. Kind of a pre-built sales example. You can see, again, now that everybody's gotten familiar with how easy using analytics in the cubes is to build out anything, you'll see how easy it is to actually build out the specific dashboard that I put together. So again, we go into this breakdown. You can see what we did here is we just grabbed sales amount, item amount, sales profit, and then we broke it down by item category to get our values. And then we just created a chart on this. And you can see here, let's clean this guy up a little bit here so you can see what it looks like without those filters. We go back into this example. All we did here is we created this portion and then we dropped a graph in. We did the same thing in this example. We just looked at sales amount by salespeople, sales amount by year and quarter. We dropped everything into one central landing page. And then all the formatting that we did here was just using Excel. So we basically told the pivot tables that they're going to stay where they're going to be. The pivot tables are going to be affecting kind of all of these examples. And then we can tie everything together. And I can go in and grab those 4 salespeople. So I can tie in those details depending on kind of what I want to look at and how I have everything structured out. I can look at specific item categories. Now all of a sudden you get this insight. And some of the reports that we've built out are really great, but reports are effective for kind of getting a clear sense of kind of where we're at. So like if we wanted to look at the item value over time for our inventory, I was able to do that very quickly. If I want to look at kind of where we're at for aging buckets, but where the dashboards are going to provide a little bit more functionality is if you want to get into more kind of broader insights about your organization. You can do that with dashboards because you can visually see a lot of your different breakdowns, and then you can slice and dice them because of the Jet Analytics solution and how everything's already pre-calculated. So I can tie everything together. I can easily get access to it, and I can easily, like I said, pull through information, explore my data without really necessarily any clear idea of what I'm looking for, but I can find these sort of trends. So this is really going to be critical. Another thing to note, and I noted this at my other training that I did for Optimus last year, is dashboards are going to provide a much more robust way to interact with your data. We always talk about slicing and dicing being a critical component here. The nice part about Jet Analytics is you can do that very quickly because everything's already pre-calculated, and your users are actually better able to understand your business as you do this. They've done a lot of different studies around how people learn, and typically they've found that 10% of people will remember what they read, people will remember rather 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, but 80% of what they see and do. So if you're interacting with your data source here, where I'm slicing and dicing data, I'm not only seeing these examples and these graphs, but I'm actually interacting with them. So I'm getting that do component, which means I'm getting a much better understanding of my business than I would if I'm just running static reports and then seeing details. This is going to really help me, like I said, understand my organization a little bit better. So again, we've got this dashboard that was very easy to build out inside of Excel. But the nice part is that with the analytics tool, you can not only build out complex reports, but you can also build out very complex dashboards. And those don't even have to live inside of Excel. Those can actually live in tools like Power BI. So like here's an example of an accounts payable dashboard that we have. You can see this one's already pre-set up. And we've got everything broken down. I think by now, pretty much everybody's getting pretty familiar with how easy the cubes are to use. So I'm really hoping that, at this point, most of the folks on the call can look at this and say, oh yeah, I could absolutely build out this dashboard because I've seen how easy it is to set up stuff with the cubes. And again, this is inside of Power BI. Power BI is a great tool, but the important thing to remember is it's a data visualization tool. So most of the investment with Power BI that Microsoft put into it was making stuff look as clean and as nice as possible. So you'll see you've got a lot of control over the coloring and the look and feel of this dashboard. The typical challenge for most folks trying to use Power BI on its own is really similar to the challenge that we've been talking about today of using a real-time reporting tool against a data source versus using analytics. If I go in and I'm opening up a new Power BI dashboard, so you'll see that in a second here. The first thing that it'll ask me to do is to get my data. And we'll see if I can drag that example over here. So you'll see I open this up. Before it even lets me get into the screen, it says get your data. Got to know where my data is. So I open that up, and this will be really easy with an analytics tool. You'll see that example here in a second. But if I just want to connect directly to my data source, it's going to be fairly challenging. It'll be like building out that first example report that we built out where we had to look at all the different tables and fields inside of Great Plains in order to tie it together. So first example here, if I'm using a dashboarding tool and trying to go in directly against the data source, I'm going to open it up. And let's drag this guy over. You can see I've got a couple different data sources. Let's open up this guy here. And you can see I've got all my tables and fields, and I have to start tying all these together. And if you want to have a good dashboard, you want to have multiple tables and fields. You want to be able to slice and dice stuff. But if I'm just using Power BI on its own, it's fairly difficult. Again, I have to know where all my tables and fields sit. I have to be able to tie all this together. With Jet Analytics, that process is not required. I just need to connect into the cubes. Same thing, we'll just log in. This time we want to go in and grab our cubes. And there is our cubes. So we know how to build stuff out. And we'll go into sales here in this example. And I can go in and build out anything that I want. So if I want to build out a sales by item category, I can build that out easily. And like I said, I think everybody on this call, since we've run through so many examples, should all be able to see, like I said, how much easier it is to do any of this evaluation using the cubes because we've tied everything together. But now that we've tied everything together, this is where you as the end user really get to take advantage of a data visualization tool like Power BI, so that you can see all the really nice ways to display this information. I can look at sales, and then let's say I want to look at sales by done posting. Well, we haven't done posting date. Let's add that in there. Let's add year. Let's break that down. We can drag all that in. So fairly standard dashboard, nothing too exciting. Let's actually show what Power BI excels at, which is if I want to do a bit more of like a complex data visualization, I can do that. I can look at sales and get profit percentage. And I actually want to see, okay, where are our most profitable customers? This is where Power BI really excels. And I can chop and dice, and slice and dice this by salespeople, depending on kind of what I want to look at. And then the last thing, we talked about KPIs always being critical towards an analytics deployment. Again, the nice part about Jet is that those can be pre-calculated values. So I can actually go in and say, hey, I want to actually look at, let's look at actual profit percentage. And then we can slice and dice stuff depending on what we want to look at. And this is great because I can even look at, okay, well, where are our most profitable customers depending on what we want to look at. I want to look at different locations. I can do that. You know, I'm here. It's a little south of Portland, Oregon. I can see all those details. And all of that's going to have that quick responsiveness depending on what I'm looking at. Perfect. So yeah, that's kind of everything that I had for today. So I'm going to go back into the slides here. I'm going to leave this on a slide for everybody. Again, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. One thing to note, and I know this came out, is that there is a big promo that Optimus has secured for all of their clients before, I think it's the middle of December. There's some really great discounts for folks. So I'd highly recommend if you have a chance to reach out to them, get more details on that. As always, you know, Optimus just being great advocates for their clients really secured some great options there. So I'd strongly recommend going back and reaching out to the Optimus team. So I'm going to leave it on this slide, but I want to make sure and see if there's any questions. So if anybody has any questions, again, feel free to send those into the chat bar. We'll try and take a look at those as we have everything set up.